Hi, I'm David Levine. I'm co-chairman of Science Writers in New York. In the background is Joe Bonner, my co-chair, who is handling the recording and will also be putting this on YouTube. My guest tonight is Dr. Sara Mednick. She's a professor in the Department of Cognitive Science at the University of California, Irvine, and the author of Take a Nap, Change Your Life. But the book we're discussing tonight is her latest book that was just published. It's called The Power of the Downstate, Recharge Your Life Using Your Body's Own Restorative Systems. So we'll ask her about that. Joe, could you show the book? Oh, there we go. So for her PhD in the Department of Psychology at Harvard, she pioneered nap studies, which provided methodological advancements from nocturnal sleep studies, and now the dominant research method to understand the role of sleep and formation. During her postdoc at the Salk Institute in the University of California, San Diego, she was awarded a grant from the National Institute of Health Fellowship to use functional magnetic resonance imaging to understand the neural mechanisms supporting sleep-dependent memory consolidation. She's conducted studies in conjunction with numerous academic institutions, as well as the US Navy and the VA. Her articles have been published in Nature Neuroscience and Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, and her work has been covered by CNN, Reuters, NPR, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and a lot of other publications. So, Dr. Mednick, thank you very much for joining us. So why don't you tell us about what is the downside? What is the power of the downside?
The downstate? Well, first, thanks for bringing me on your webinar. And I hope there isn't a downside, but there's definitely a downstate. And the downstate is an umbrella term I came up with through research in my lab and with other labs that looks at all of the restorative processes that we need to engage in on a daily basis to refill our tanks, get ourselves restored so that we have the energy and resources to take on the next challenge. And so I talk about these as downstates because we are rhythmic animals, which means that we have upstates where we have these optimal states of energy, and we're fortified with a lot of glucose and glycogen and ATP and all the things that we need to go out and take over the world. And those activities in the upstate run down our resources and they drain us. And so then once we've completed the upstate, we need to get into a downstate where we get replenished, all those resources get replenished. And then we get ready for the next upstate. So basically that's the rhythm of these upstates and downstates and upstates and downstates. So in my lab, we discovered that these downstates are actually key to being able to perform well in the upstate.
Yeah, it says that our metabolism is an upstate where it's at its prime. The resources are primarily for eating, and downstate where we should stop eating and give it some time to restore itself and replenish its resources. Our brains also have this upstate and downstate where the brain's frontal cortex, which is a part of the brain that does all the executive function and attention and big thinking. The brain area actually is a period where it's at its most powerful. Then it starts to recede, it goes into the downstate where it can replenish itself. So, I read your book, and I gather that, that it's great to be in the upstate, but too many people stay in the upstate too long by not going to sleep, by not, I know I'm guilty of this. So I read my phone before I go to sleep. I should not be doing that. I should not be watching TV after 10 o'clock. All these things, and but it's hard. And so, what part of the upstate is necessary?
That's a great question.
During the day, I mean, you have to, you have to stay awake to work and go to sleep.
So, I mean, you brought up a lot of different things. And I just want to kind of
Okay.
take a second to break it down a little bit. So the book is definitely a framework where you can look at your frontal lobe, right? You can look at cognitive processing and the upstates and downstates of cognitive processing, like you brought up. You can look at your metabolism, where you have these optimal periods for eating and glucose metabolism and utilization of glucose. And that's in the upstate. And then in the downstate, we're actually terrible at using glucose. And so it just gets turned into fat. We have upstates and downstates for our autonomic nervous system, where we're naturally able to take on stressful experiences during the upstate. And then in the downstate, we need to get into this restorative mode where we can make up for all of the corrosive activities that happened in the upstate. And exercise is also a really big upstate that you can actually engage to voluntarily put yourself in an upstate where your heart is racing and you're, it's a little bit of a stress reaction actually to exercise. And that can be great because it can jumpstart your sympathetic nervous system and get you all revved up and then go into restore afterwards. And you can time your exercise and you can time your eating, you can time your stressful experiences so that you have everything happening in these optimal biorhythms where, the moment that you are at your best for the upstate is the time that you can time all these activities so that they happen in the upstate. And then you can have, your rest and digest type of behaviors in that downstate. So as you also brought up, we live in a culture that does not abide by our upstates, right? It does not support, it doesn't abide by our downstates. It doesn't support our downstates, but it does drive more time, more intensity, greater magnitude of upstates. And you see that in all of those different domains we just talked about, right? You see that we have really high, our days are packed. And a lot of the things that they're packed with are quite stressful, right? That we have a lot of experiences that we've got to run around and do a lot of things what I call people doozers, or, just running from thing to thing to thing, and you're doozering all day long. But then as what you also said is when you get to that time where you should be kind of checking out and going into this downstate, you turn on your social media and there you see a lot of stressful things that keep you all revved up and keep you emotionally charged and are not really heading into a downstate mode, right? You can want to throw your phone across the room when you see what's happening in the news, which is now 24-hour, infotainment kind of broadcasting, and then social media, as we talked about. But then also think about metabolism. Think about how you can be in these really long upstates because you just keep eating. And people eat way into the evening when their insulin levels actually are 20%, 30% less than in their upstate. And that means that glucose isn't being used in the cells. It's just being turned into fat. So we have this culture that kind of extends our upstate and doesn't give us, doesn't prioritize the downstate. And then again, expects us to be ready for the next upstate.
I was told by my doctor to avoid heartburn, don't eat after 9 o'clock. And also to avoid spikes in blood sugar, don't eat after 9 o'clock.
Yeah, I mean, that's what all of this, intermittent fasting is about, right? They're just saying, just don't do this. But the real why is because you have these biorhythms and that you have this time where you're optimized for eating. In those experiments, Sachin Panda showed that his animals that are only eating in the upstate can eat whatever they want. And they don't have any changes to metabolic health or weight gain. It's the animals that eat ad libitum 24 hours or even, the same amount of calories that the ones who are only eating in the upstate. Those are the ones who gain weight, they get diabetes, they have metabolic disorder. So it's really, eating when you're at your least efficient is not a good idea.
So you're a sleep researcher.
Yeah.
And that's how you came to this. What was your greatest discovery of what happens when people sleep and how it relates to the downstates and upstates.
Yeah. I mean, I think I have two great discoveries. I mean, I really think that there's two things I've contributed to science, and now and each one has a book. The first one is about the nap. When I started doing research, I was working with Bob Stickgold, and he had just started doing this research where he was really mapping out the methodology that we could use to understand how sleep benefited, this offline period could benefit what you were doing online, right? So he learned how, he set up this idea of testing people on memory tasks before they go to sleep, and then having them go to sleep with EEG, and then testing them again when they wake up. And it seems so simple. But then he would use all these really great controls of, having people sleep deprived or testing people across a day for just awake. And he was showing that really you need 6 to 8 hours of sleep to show any type of learning. And then he could see what was happening in the brain and why it was affecting your memory. And it was really exciting stuff. But there was all these confounds with his research because he was looking at nighttime sleep. And there was very little that you could do with nighttime sleep, because if you wanted to deprive people, say, of REM sleep or slow wave sleep, you had to really go in there and wake them up every time you wanted them to stop having that type of sleep. And there was a very bad control for wake because people would be sleep deprived. And that's not a great control for sleep, obviously, because people are sleep deprived and they're very unhappy on top of being sleep deprived. And then, so the idea is, what could we do to create a better comparison group across different sleep conditions? And I came up with the idea of doing the nap, because the nap, everybody gets trained and tested at the same time, morning and evening. You have a nap of different durations, and each different duration gives you a specific sleep stage. So you can really do these really cool, REM deprivation studies or slow wave sleep deprivation studies by just the duration of the nap. And then your control group is just people who don't nap. So there isn't a lot of confounds with sleep deprivation. So it became actually, now it's mostly the way that people do a lot of sleep research to understand the role of sleep with memory, because of all of these great controls that you can have in terms of looking into the sleeping brain. So that was really exciting. And what we discovered was that the sleep stages predicted the type of sleep, the type of memory improvement that you would have, and that specific sleep stages were associated with specific types of memories. And then the idea of the nap book with the nap wheel, where you could determine how much slow wave sleep and REM sleep and stage 2 sleep you had by this nap wheel, meant that you could kind of engineer the nap. And that was a really fun idea. That was the first one. And then as I got my sleep lab, I started getting really interested in the body mind, and realized, everyone's focusing on the brain and everyone's focusing on neurons, and neurons are super cool and there's a lot to discover there, but we also have a whole body associated with the brain as well, right? That we are one whole system. And so I wanted to understand the role of the autonomic nervous system along with the central nervous system in the brain. So I started doing research. I just added the ECG component, electrocardiogram, to measure cardiac autonomic nervous system signals. And that's when we really discovered, like, wow, the autonomic nervous system is playing a huge role in sleep, and playing a huge role in all of those cognitive benefits that we were seeing with just looking at brain activity. If you look at parasympathetic and sympathetic activity, you also see a very large role that the body is inputting during this offline period. So that was sort of the impetus for me writing this book, is realizing how important the downstate of sleep is, the downstate of the autonomic nervous system, and then seeing it other places, right? That pattern of the downstate of the metabolic system, the downstate of recovery after exercise.
So for those listening, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box and I will get to them once they're there. So in Ben Franklin's days, people didn't sleep 8 hours a night straight through. I read that he would get up at 4 in the morning, he would read for an hour or two, then go back to sleep. Now, is that okay? I mean, because we have this myth that you need to have 8 hours of sleep, which I don't, in a row. But it's actually a more modern, that's a modern context. In the olden days, people didn't sleep like that.
But they also went to sleep earlier.
Yeah,
So,
yes.
so I think that there's a lot of differences between a world from Ben Franklin's age where, there wasn't really a lot of ways to control your evening, right? You had candlelight and you had firelight, and you had the night came and it was a pretty heavy, long night, right? So people would go to
cable never worked.
No, right? The internet was always going in and out, right? Yeah. So there's a big difference between. It's not just that people used to be polyphasic, which people have been polyphasic, multi-phases of sleep forever, and we still are polyphasic. We sleep, we take naps, and people wake up in the middle of the night. They still do that, and they have little, and they call it insomnia now, or maintenance insomnia. And it could also just be that we have these natural phases that make us wake up and, have little active periods, and then another downstate comes. But right now we pathologize that enormously because we also don't really let people nap. But I think one of the other problems is that we really go to sleep much later than we should because of Netflix and because of social media and because we're trying to cram too much into our upstate day. And it means that we're working late and we're, expecting more of ourselves than maybe we naturally should. So, and especially because that first period of sleep, dependent on the time of day, it's not just dependent on when you go to sleep, but those first few hours of sleep from like 9 to 10 to midnight to 1 is mostly what's called slow wave sleep. And that is the most restorative sleep you can get. So, the more you push your bedtime to later and later and later, the other stage of sleep that comes in is REM sleep. And REM is a circadian, REM is driven by circadian processes, which means that it's going to come on no matter what at a certain time, whether you've gone to sleep early or late, you're still going to get REM at a certain time. So that's why you want to try to get to bed early, because it makes sure that you get enough slow wave sleep before the REM onset.
Yeah. So I see a quote here. Trying to get to sleep at 10 o'clock is a great time, or even earlier if you can, because then it maximizes the amount of that deep slow wave sleep before you get into REM sleep. All right, so President Clinton said he only slept 5 hours. Jay Leno said that he only sleeps 5 hours. He said, I don't do manual labor. So are they missing out? Can some people actually function well in 5 hours of sleep?
Well, Clinton was a big napper.
Okay.
So that's really important is that when people say they only sleep 5 hours, some people are only sleeping 5 hours at night, but then when they get to work, they have, a 10-minute here, 10-minute there, half hour here, half an hour there, right? And that's, what we've shown is that you can get 2 days in one day if you take a nap in the middle of the day, just performance wise on, a whole bunch of different types of performances. So we've looked at declarative memory and perceptual learning and motor learning and attention and selective attention and working memory. So a lot of different type of cognitive domains benefit to a very large extent the same as a full night of sleep when you have a nap. So I think that, there definitely are short sleepers. There are people who are genetically tuned to really not need that much nighttime sleep. And some people don't sleep that much at night, and they also add on with these naps. So I think that And of course, we lionize this idea of like, I don't need to sleep, right? And as though that's so great.
People actually brag about it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, people brag about how much work they have and
Yeah.
how busy they are and how they can't sleep and how they don't get sleep. And yeah, and it's part of, the culture that I think is also leading us to states of chronic stress and increased cardiovascular disease and diabetes and increased weight gain and sitting around on our computers all day. So it's not like these are things that we want to, look to as great beacons of health, I would say.
So my daughter has 2 young children, and she always complains, oh, I don't get any sleep. She said, you don't understand. And I said, I do understand, because I had a young daughter, you, I have a young son. So parents aren't getting them on, I mean, I'm going to work many days like sleep deprived. And it's very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's also more and more difficult because parents are getting older and older when they first have kids. So when you're young, and you don't sleep that well, it's all right. You're resilient, right? We didn't used to have 40-year-old parents and 50-year-old parents, but now we do. So I think it actually takes a bigger toll as you get older. And, when you're young, you actually are incredibly resilient to many things. And at the same time, when I say that, I also have research that I can point to that shows that older adults are actually quite resilient to sleep deprivation because it looks as though they get less and less sleep at night. Their sleep is more and more fragmented, but they may be tuning into downstates during the day that allow them to make up for that sleep loss, either by doing relaxations or taking naps or just having less stress in their lives, that they seem to have some ability to be resilient to sleep deprivation. Whereas young people actually do show greater performance deficits when they are sleep deprived. So it's kind of a mixed bag in terms of, why do we lose sleep as we get older? I think that's a really interesting question in science. It's an absolutely clear phenomenon. Our circadian rhythms get weaker, meaning that we have less, we have weaker, strong arousal signals that should wake us up and keep us awake during the day. So we take little naps during the day, but we also have weaker sleep signals during the night, which means that it's harder to get to sleep and harder to stay asleep as we get older. Our sleep is more fragmented as we get older. We have less slow wave sleep. So, why? What is going on there? It's a huge question in science right now.
Well, I have a question. So not everybody can go to a lab and have a sleep study. And there are now take-home tests that people do at home, but there are also a lot of sleep apps. And I did an article on sleep apps, and some of them are just recorders. They record your movement, these kinds of things. But obviously the gold standard is to go to a sleep lab because they're measuring brain activity. But not everybody can afford it. Not everybody wants to do it. I did it for a story. It was not fun to be hooked up to. I think, how am I going to measure sleep? My brain is hooked up. My heart is hooked up. People get
respiration, motion on your legs. You would get sensors on your legs to see if you had restless leg syndrome.
I know. But one of the researchers, the president of Sleep Fund, who said that what he liked about the apps, he said they're not perfect, but at least they're giving people a better awareness of sleep. Because people measure. Everyone says, I did 10,000 steps today. I say, good for you. They measure their respiration. People now can look at their smartwatch and see what their blood sugar is. But people don't talk about sleep that much. I mean, I never had a doctor ask me really, how's your sleep? And
isn't that a shocking thing?
It is. Yeah.
It's so, I mean, as a sleep researcher, this is one of the things I find the most frustrating and as a person who has been in a hospital and has been with people in hospitals, how the medical world is has not woken up to the benefits of sleep. I mean, they are supposed to be healers, and they're in absolute denial of the best natural healer that we have, which is sleep. And the systems in the hospital are set up to prevent sleep. There was a great article in the New York Times this past weekend. Did you see it? It was the front cover of the magazine, and it's about circadian rhythms, and this really cool researcher who is really making strides in the medical field to try to get hospitals and doctors to consider circadian rhythm. When you give people medicine, figure out, well, when is this drug actually at its most effective? So give that drug at that time. Don't give that drug when it's actually not going to work because that organ is shut down, right? It's in its downstate. And similarly, working with hospitals around creating a system where you actually give people time to sleep when they're in the hospital. It seems like such an obvious thing, but it's almost impossible to find that in a hospital setting.
One of my friends is a psychologist, and the teacher said, if you only had one question to ask a patient to assess their mental state, what would that be? And everyone gave, they said, oh, I'd ask them, are they depressed? Are they sad? How they get along with their parents? And he says, no, the answer is, how do you sleep?
Yeah. Because sleep is also it reflects a very general sense of like your mental health, your physical health. So how are you doing psychologically? That is impacting, sleep is impacting that, and it's impacting sleep.
All right, so I have a question. I'm going to take it. I lived in Israel in the 1970s and loved that stores closed and people nap for an hour or more in the afternoon. Is there any way to incorporate and legitimize that naps into the American workplace? If it is, shown how it can increase productivity, save costs on medical expenses, reduce burnout, promote greater satisfaction, etc. The work clearly underscores these benefits. So I just want to add that this, I've been to Israel, and if people get up, people work from 8 to 11, they take breaks because it was hot for air conditioning. I mean, this is also in like other European countries. It was a very common thing that people would not work during the hottest part of the day and whatever. And so when you answer that, I also want to ask you a question: that should workplaces, if people ever go back to work, have nap rooms for people?
Well, I mean, I think that part of what a lot of people enjoyed during the pandemic was being able to nap if they wanted to, being able to make their own hours, exercise when they wanted to, eat what and when they wanted to, and nap if they wanted to. I think that, that I've been fighting this battle since I think my book came out December 2006, the first one, the nap book. And, there's letters in that book that you can write to your boss. Here's why. There's a nap manifesto. Here's why. This is all good. But we definitely live in a world where that is not a acceptable way of spending your boss's hours, right? That's the way it's seen. Like when you're at work, you're on your boss's time. But what are they promoting? They're promoting more caffeine, which then makes you not be able to fall asleep that night. And then you have a bad night of sleep, and then you wake up and you're not doing well the next day. So there's in general, I think that it would be great if America and other, there's many other countries that actually do supported napping. I have a study where in China, naps are absolutely embedded in the culture. There's a 2-hour period of lunch every day in school, and the kids take a good old nap. They take a half hour of sleeping, half hour of eating, and then they take a nap right there on their desk. And then they have the rest of their day. And we did a study looking at how frequent people nap this is in 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, how frequently they napped, between 0 to 7 times a week, and how long was their nap, between 0 to over 60 minutes. And what we found is the kids who napped the most frequently, 7 days a week, and 60 minutes or more were the ones that had the greatest academic performance. They had the greatest grit and happiness. They had the lowest sort of conduct issues, and less depression and anxiety. So, and it didn't affect any of these sort of biological measurements like BMI. And I think we measured maybe blood pressure. There was one other thing that we measured, which is interesting. It was really just, how are you feeling that day? How resilient do you feel? And how well are you doing in school?
So how long should an ideal nap be? Because I know if you sleep 2 hours, you're going to have trouble getting to sleep at night.
Yeah. I mean, it really depends on the person. Some people can nap, I was just talking to somebody the other day. They're like, oh, 45 minutes, that's my nap, right? And when you're a napper, I will say, caveat, really only 50% of the population are nappers, and the other people shouldn't nap because they don't get any benefit out of it. And even if they try to train themselves to nap, they still don't get any benefits. And all of this I've researched. I have studies where I look at nappers and non-nappers. I try to train, non-nappers do not get any benefit from nap. Then I try to train them over a month to do nap training. And I keep testing them to see, did they get any benefits cognitively? Nope. They still feel like crap when they wake up, and they definitely don't get any performance benefits. So there's something special about nappers. And that's but that also means that these other people still need a break, right? So the nap is great for the nappers, but the downstate, getting back to the downstate, that is necessary no matter who you are. Whether you're taking a nap during the day, whether you're going on a run instead, taking a walk in nature, doing something, meditating, doing something where you're dropping into that deep parasympathetic restorative place where you're decreasing your sympathetic revved up stress response, and you're getting into this relaxation response. That's what we need, and everybody needs it. It really just depends on kind of your personal makeup, whether it is in the form of sleep or exercise or deep breathing.
So there's that famous book, Herb Benson wrote The Relaxation Response, where he studied meditators. And actually, I think he studied people who did transcendental meditation. And he found that, they went to these states of sleep, they were more relaxed. And he said that, it's something that can be learned.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you need to actually learn how to breathe. We are a culture of not very healthy breathers. We breathe through our mouths, and we breathe very shallowly. We stay in this very panicky kind of shallow breathing. And we've lost the art of nasal breathing, these low, deep, slow, filtered breath from our nose. There's this great book, Breath by James Nestor, where he talks about the lost art of nasal breathing and how it's actually changed our physiognomy of our faces, where our palates have collapsed, and now we have all sorts of sleep apnea problems, breathing problems. We have that kind of dull face where, like, the mouth breathing face. And there's studies that show, like, when you're nose breathing, you actually show better memory performance than when you're mouth breathing. You have a way more capacity to experience carbon dioxide, which is also very healthy, when you learn how to nasal breathe. So and nasal breathing is a slower breath, and it allows you to tap into that that parasympathetic restorative system.
So here's a question. I keep hearing about vagal nerve regulation and stimulation. I have sleep issues, breathing issues, anxiety, and some depression, inappropriate weight gain, and debilitating fatigue. even when I'm not working and can get plenty of sleep. What are your thoughts on vagus nerve stimulation in relation to your research and findings?
Yeah. So I talk a lot about the vagus.
What is vagus nerve stimulation?
Yeah. So the vagus nerve is the main cranial nerve that we can actually access, directly access and stimulate, that feeds our brain with parasympathetic information, and also that the brain feeds back, talks to our heart and the rest of our body, our parasympathetic system, through the vagus nerve. So basically around 80 to 90% of our information from our body goes to the brain through the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is vagus, meaning, which is the word for wandering, because it is so precocious. It just goes to all of these major organs, and it either gets you into a state of the relaxed state and calm you down, or your vagus turns off, and then you get into the state of panic. And then, those are really the two states: this revved up, panicky, stressed state, or this relaxed, restorative state of the vagus nerve. So vagal stimulation can be done either transcutaneously through the ear. You can get these little earbuds, or people actually have vagal nerve implants that actually sit directly on the nerve and send electrical stimulation to jack up your parasympathetic response. And there's incredible wide range of benefits from vagal nerve stimulation that include emotional, depression, anxiety, insomnia, but also a wide range of physical healing properties that include hypertension and wound healing. Actually, there's a lot, and because the vagus is the main communicator between the brain and the guts, you also can benefit some metabolic issues. So there's a really wide range of medical, psychological, and potentially what we're also investigating is cognitive benefits that can come with naturally stimulating your vagus nerve by deep breathing, by doing yoga, meditation, a lot of different practices that engage in slow, deep breathing, but also by having a device that helps you actually with a little bit of, electrical stimulation.
So I want to talk about sleep apnea, because that's a very popular diagnosis these days, and the treatments for it. I mean, so the gold standard is CPAP machine, but for a lot of people can't tolerate it. To be hooked up like that, even though the machines have gotten better, the discontinuation rate is like 75%. There's also dental devices that people can put into their mouth, but some people get TMJ from it. So are there good, treatments for sleep apnea?
No, I mean, they're mostly just treatments that you're talking about. I think that one of the things that, that these are getting better. The technologies are getting more user-friendly, so that there is a little bit more and more you see people saying it's worth the discomfort, right? Because the ratio of discomfort to benefits is increasing. So, but depending on the type of sleep apnea people have, whether it's structural, whether it's in the brain, it all, different treatments can be used. But what I think the thing that I really come back to a lot is, what can you do when you're not sleeping to make sure that you're going to get good sleep at night? And that's not just for sleep apnea, but for any kind of sleep disorder, right? I think that as sleep researchers focus a lot on that sleep window period, about sleep hygiene and all the things that you can do to make your bedroom really great, and to make your head get in the right place, do CBTI, and whatever it is that you can do. But I think, in my book, The Power of the Downstate, it's really about what can you do during the day that sets you up for good sleep at night. because we are really one whole system, right? So what you do during the day is going to predict how well you can actually get into that downstate at night. So I think that that's sort of one of the things that this book offers beyond just being a focus on sleep.
In the book, you talk about how our vital organs and systems benefit from spending more time with downstate, which decreases the risk for Alzheimer's disease, chronic disease, and early death. So thank you for sparing us, and also how we can activate the downstate through rethinking how to breathe, eat, sleep, and exercise. And you also have a practical 4-week downstate recovery plus plan. What is your recovery plus plan?
So I wanted to, I really spend a lot of time talking about the science. That's the majority of the book. And at the end of every chapter, I give very clear recommendations for what people can do. But I also feel like it's sometimes helpful just to have a plan for how you're going to do something. And so this system I developed is based on this idea that we have these 4 domains, which is the autonomic nervous system, sleep and circadian rhythm, exercise and nutrition. And these are all ways that we can manipulate and control our upstates and downstates. It's a 4-week program, 1 week for each domain. And within each week, I offer 5 to 7 action items that people can do. And each of these has been proven. There's tons of research backing each of these different action items that can get you into better rhythm with your upstates and downstates. And so the first week, there's 5 to 7 for the autonomic. Next week, so then you would start with that. Pick one and just pick the easiest one that's on this list for you, whatever really speaks to you. Get that going for 1 week. And then in the second week, add something from the sleep. In the third week, add something from exercise. And in the fourth week, add something from eating. And then you start to have this system where you're actually really taking care of yourself. And you see, I've gotten incredible responses from people who've been on this plan who said that they've, their heart rate has decreased by significant levels. Their doctors are seeing all sorts of changes to their physiology that is really positive. So I'm encouraged by the results.
So here's a question from a friend of mine, my former editor at Bottom Line Health. Does a generally high resting heart rate interfere with restorative sleep?
So there are people who have a generally high resting heart rate who sleep really deeply. And so there isn't necessarily it doesn't necessarily mean doom and gloom. I do think if you have a high resting heart rate, there is a higher chance that you can be in a more revved up state, which can make it harder for you to get to sleep. So getting into restorative practices that really elongate the inner beat intervals, right? Which that when you get into deep, slow breathing, that shows a really strong two-way interaction between your respiration and your heart rate. You can slow your heart rate by doing deep breathing. And once you get into that state of having your respiration and your heart rate coupled, in just that their rhythms of upstates and downstates are coupled, you actually get these really strong parasympathetic increases shown by increases in heart rate variability. So definitely just having a high heart rate doesn't necessarily mean that you have bad sleep, but improving, lowering the heart rate and getting it into a, downstate more often will also benefit you.
So I have a question. So I just wrote an article about, alternative treatments for depression. And one of them is sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation has been shown to take depression away. It goes away once a person goes to sleep. Why would sleep deprivation be a treatment for depression?
So depression is a super interesting, it's awful, obviously, but the relationship between sleep and depression is really interesting. There's actually 3 different treatments that are being used now to help people with depression. And they're trying to, and there are some researchers who are trying to put them all together in one. So one thing is that definitely like suicidal depression can be decreased by one night of sleep deprivation, but it's only a temporary fix. And so that's one data point, right? So why is that? Well, there's probably some sort of inner circadian rhythm that's off, and there's some sort of resetting that happens when you have that night of sleep deprivation. But another issue with depression and sleep is that people with depression usually have a lot more REM sleep. And REM sleep is known to be a time of very emotional processing that, you know, it can actually be beneficial for emotional processing, but too much REM sleep can actually get you into an emotional state that is a little bit dysregulated. So there's this REM component. And then people also have this circadian dysregulation where they start sleeping later and later, and go to sleep later and later and sleep later and later. And that means that they're going to have more REM sleep because, as I said, REM is high in the morning. So there's a treatment that's really interesting that has been showing some really good promise with severe depression, which is you start with a night of sleep deprivation. I mean, this is all under extreme control in the hospital. You know, you wouldn't do this at home, but you start with a night of sleep deprivation, and then you you switch the night of sleep so that once you start sleeping, then you start to have these earlier nights and you wake up early. And then right when you wake up, you have bright light, because bright light has been shown to be extremely good for resetting the circadian rhythm and starting the upstate, right? The first signal for your brain to get into the upstate is blue light. So you sit there in front of a bright light system. And that has been, you know, that there's this like 3 different pronged approach to treating depression, which I think is super promising because first, just the idea that if there's something that's driving the depression that's sleep related and that you can treat that, that's awesome, right? That would actually be wonderful.
So another question is, what does it mean if one night you spend less than 20 minutes in REM sleep, the next night you spend 90 minutes in REM sleep?
Is this person using a device to let them know this? They must.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine that they're going to a sleep lab with PSG every night to know what their variety of REM is. So yeah, so the caveat there is that REM sleep in particular is the most difficult sleep stage to track for these devices. So I would put the least amount of faith in the REM minutes. The slow wave sleep is easier because there's a lot of signals that these new devices are using, particularly like Aura and Whoop. They're using a lot of the autonomic nervous system signals, and those show very strong changes, as my research and others have shown, during slow wave sleep, but they really are very volatile during REM sleep. And so I wouldn't put too much attachment to the actual minutes of REM sleep. But what does it mean? You know, I mean, you tell us, right? Like, if you sleep longer and into the morning and you have more REM sleep, maybe you're going to be a little more emotional that day. Maybe you're going to be a little moodier. Maybe you're going to have, you know, you're going to get into this very intense dream stuff that if you wake up early, you don't have. So that can have an effect on you. But we've also shown that REM sleep is very good for creativity. It's very good for perceptual processing. It's very good for creating semantic relationships between ideas. So, you know, REM sleep is highly important, but too much of it can be a bad thing for some people.
So some people I know wake up very anxious. Does that mean they're, you know, and someone said, don't wake a person up for sleeping, let them wake up naturally. Does that really matter?
So you're saying that if you wake up artificially, does that make people anxious?
Well, kind of. I mean, you know, they said, that if you wake up, if you wake up a person, they can get startled. But I sometimes, sometimes I wake up and I'm like a little startled. Other times I wake up, I'm not startled.
Yeah.
I have no idea why, and I don't really dwell on it too much.
I mean, I don't know why either. I do know that it's that waking up from a deep stage of sleep, like slow wave sleep, can make people grumpy and can make people feel really bad and have headaches and have sleep, what's called sleep inertia. And if you wake up from a lighter stage of sleep, then you feel it's much more similar. The brain activity is much more similar to waking. So when you wake up, you just kind of are, you just transition to wake very easily. So, naturally waking up, your brain is going to go from heavy sleep to light sleep. So naturally letting somebody wake up, they will wake up in an easier state of sleep. And that would be one reason to not wake somebody up, is to let them transition. But there's lots of ways, like lots of alarm clocks now that are trying to kind of operate with this idea of slowly getting you into a waking state.
So the last question I'm going to take is there a correlation between having a glass of wine in the evening and waking up in the middle of the night?
Yes, but not necessarily. I mean, for sure, it depends on how sensitive you are. A glass of wine at, say, 6 p.m. is probably not going to have a big effect. A glass of wine at 9 p.m. will. 2 glasses of wine definitely will, right? So as long as that waking up in the middle of the night from alcohol definitely is a thing, and it's true. But I think it's possible to have earlier. Oops, sorry, there's a fly here. Possible to have earlier drinks, have the happy hour and not have it be a huge effect. Of course, it's all about moderation, right?
So I'm going to ask you, where can people get your book?
Yeah. I have a website, saramednick.com, and there's links to Amazon and Bookshop, whatever it is that you like to buy from. And I read my own book on Audible, so that's also kind of fun. If you like to listen to books, it's on Audible. And that's it. And I'm on Twitter as well, in case people want to communicate. Sara_Mednick.
So on July 28th, I'm going to be speaking to Dr. Jamie Reeser, who is going to discuss the health of our ecosystem directly affects human health, and a healthy ecosystem can help prevent future pandemics. So we're going to be off next week. Joe is on vacation. I was away for 2 weeks, and that was nice to be able to experiencing jet lag and doing all kinds of things to stay put. Anyways, my guest tonight was Dr. Sara Mednick, who's a very great sleep researcher. She's also a very good writer. I highly recommend her book. I'm going to buy the book on napping because I would like to read that. I like to nap myself. And we put in the chat, here's her book, and we also put in the chat some of the links to her websites and things. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And thank you so much.
Thanks so much, David. This is such a pleasure.
Oh, great. It's nice to hear that. Okay, take care. Good night.
Take care. Bye.
Stay safe out there. Bye-bye.